Speaking of speakers.
Todd Madison has been here before. He was with School of Choice of California, which kind of went down in flames. But I think it was probably because of the write-up that was in the ballot measure. And I know Carl Mayo has got something going right now to restrict the right
Measures to the actual facts and not the fantasy that the Democrats have put out sometimes. I should have mentioned the name, but that's what it is. Anyway, I think some of the numbers that Todd is going to come up with are going to be a little bit interesting for you. Let me say interesting. Yeah, okay. Like a wart right on the end of your nose. Anyway, Todd, you have the microphone.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much. So before I get started, a couple little housekeeping things. First of all, I want to thank people like Frank Zhu, who's here today, for the advocacy that he puts forward and the work he's done on behalf of our kids and the CFER organization. He's been tireless in doing that since before I was with School Choice. Thank you, Frank. And I just want to make mention of the fact that if you don't know who Amy Richter is, you need to find out. She is not running in this area for Board of Supervisors, but I don't think there's anything more important we could do in this county right now than to get 3 seats on the Board of Supervisors, the County Board of Supervisors. And Amy is running to replace Nathan Fletcher, which, you know, I mean, you could run a doorstop and do better than Nathan Fletcher. So, and Amy is stunning. So she would be an awesome replacement. So if you know anybody in that area, you know, be sure to support Amy. So moving on to Transparent California. I'm Todd Madison. I'm the Director of Research for Transparent California. I've been doing this for Transparent California since about 2017. We'll go into what we are in a minute here, but I always like to start with this one right here. Just a bunch of numbers, right? So the top number, 421,548,421,548. That is the total amount of government public employee payroll in the state of California. So that includes every city, state, county, water district, dog catcher, school district, everyone, virtually everyone. We collect 96% of state employment or compensation data. So that's that. The bottom number, 58,972,740,147. That's pension payouts. That's how much the pension money we paid out. This is 1 year. This is for 1 year. The total at the bottom, I use scientific notation. I think people here are probably in tune with scientific notation, so I don't have to explain it too much, but it's what you use when the numbers are so big you can't fit them on the page. So that is the total amount of money we spend in government on pay and benefits for government employees. That usually represents something like 60 to 70% of our money in government tax dollars. So that is why it is important to pay attention to this. We can argue all we want about how much it costs to patch a pothole, but that's nothing compared to what we spend on government employee pay and pensions. So Transparent California does that. Our mission is to collect that data and put it on our website so that you can look it up, so you can actually know. Misinformation on what government employee makes is just endemic out there. I mean, there are still a lot of people out there, if you ask them, you know, what's it mean to be a government employee, they say, oh, well, you've got to eat cat food. You know, you've got to live in a mobile home somewhere or in a van down by the river and eat cat food because they just don't make any money. So we're going to find out in a minute exactly what that means. So why do we exist? Why does Transparent California exist? We exist because we can't trust government. We can't trust them with our money. We can't trust them to tell us what's going on. It requires people. It requires the people to figure that out and tell them, you know, and expose that. where we started, I don't know if everybody remembers, there was a scandal with the city of Bell. The city of Bell had this big scandal in the late 2000s. The LA Times actually turned it up through a Public Records Act request. They found out that the city of Bell, so the city of Bell, just so you know, if no one's ever been there, it is kind of an industrial wasteland. There are chain link fences with barbed wire all over the place. I think the median income of a resident at the time was like $30-some thousand a year. It's a very kind of, it's not the kind of place that you would go to and say, gee, this is a really nice neighborhood. The city manager was making $800,000 a year. And the reason he was making that is because the city council would approve his raises. And then he would approve the city council's raises. And we'd go back and forth. And they would just sort of scratch each other's back until they got to $800,000 a year. So, and the result of that is that their property tax rates were sky high. I think it was second in the state. Of course, they had no services. You know, if you look at the city, it was basically a dump. And as a result of that, he ended up getting hauled off in cuffs. It's actually a very rare win for the people. You know, they exposed it, put him on trial. He ended up in jail. He got 12 years in prison, $6 million corruption scheme. But that happens very rarely. And prior to Transparent California, at least, it had to happen by people taking the initiative, usually media, taking the initiative to dig into this and find out. So our mission is to expose that stuff before it becomes a $6 million. We exist, we leverage the Public Records Act request. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute and how you can do it. But the reason that we exist is under the Public Records Act. I don't know if everybody is all familiar with this or not, but the California Public Records Act only allows you to make requests for existing information. You can't go to the state and say, I would like you to give me all the information on people who are over 32, who make over $250,000, who, you know, work part-time, or, you know, you can't make a request like that because they won't have that information just readily available. But you can go to them and you can ask them for a copy of your local school superintendent's contract. You know, that's an existing document. You can ask for your city manager's contract. Anything that is an existing document. So when the state of California went through the Bell scandal, they introduced a requirement that all municipalities report their compensation to the state controller's office annually. And that's what we leverage. So we know they're reporting that to the state. So we go to them, and the fundamental thing, being government, of course, they built gray areas into this to let them wiggle. And one of the wiggles is that they aren't required to give them their names. So if you go into the state controller's office version of Transparent California, you'll see very similar data to what we have, but you won't see names. So you don't know when a employee is working and also double dipping on their pension plan because you don't have a name, you know, if you look at their data. So we decided to fill that gap by asking for the names. So that's what I do at Transparent California. I have, we're a very small operation. We have 3 basically part-time people, me and 2 interns, kind of. We make 4,600 Public Record Act requests every year, and we take that data and then we put it into a format that can be uploaded into our site. Every year, we collect over $300 billion worth of financial data from the state of California. We contact thousands of public agencies. We collect over 2.5 million employee records from the state, and we post it to our website. We are the most comprehensive database for public employee compensation in the state, probably in the United States. Web traffic. So we, believe it or not, we average over 100,000 visits a month, 41 million since we launched. We're one of the most trafficked in the world, in the top 0.0001%. I always have to count the zeros. Yes.
Of the person that did 10 years in the city of Bell, so it's in prison for 10 years. Did he get to keep the money?
You know, I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if there was a civil suit that went with that where they tried to claw back the money. I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. And also, did he still get to go on to collect his pension? Would be another good question about that. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. Good question. I'll have to look into that. So we get a lot of traffic on the website, which is great. We suspect a lot of that comes from government, public officials that are looking to see what their local city manager makes in the next city so that they can use that in negotiation. We know it happens in schools. School districts use our data all the time, so they can go back and say, well, these guys are making $300,000 a year. We should make 310. We see that all the time. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I had an email exchange with someone from the SEIU Public Employee Union who was looking at our data and had some questions. So I know they're looking at it. We have 38 million compensation and pension payment records online as of this morning at 6:39 a.m.
Wow.
So 27 million pay records from 458 government agencies, totaling $1.8 trillion in compensation. So that number seems big enough that we should want to pay attention to it, I think. 11 million pension records from 71 different pension systems, totaling $436 billion in pension payments. Again, these are significant numbers. Imagine all the potholes we could fill just by shaving a small, 0.001% off of that. So the California Public Records Act, we've discussed, I mentioned it a few times. It was originally signed in 1968 by Governor Reagan. Some of you guys may know, may be familiar. Also, your president here. But so it requires disclosure of records on request, unless exempted. There are some exempt records. For example, undercover police names. We can't ask for that. Personnel files. We can't ask them for the record of a performance review of an employee. I mean, there are certain exempt records, but almost everything is not exempt. So it's enshrined in the California Constitution. The people have the right of access to information concerning the conduct of the people's business, and access to government records has been deemed a fundamental interest of citizenship. Imagine that. We have the right to know what our government is doing. It's crazy, don't you think? Crazy topic. Here's some of the things that we find out. So we in Fontana, the city manager made $1 million without working a day in 2020. $1 million. So it's the highest I've ever seen. So the troubling part is the secrecy. The fact that Fontana paid more than required by his contract. I mean, this isn't like somebody who signed some sweetheart deal contract with a golden parachute. This is the city actually choosing to pay him more than is in his contract to leave. Apparently, the city of Fontana is a paradise. Every pothole is filled, every library is open, every park is maintained. They have no use for that money other than giving it to this guy. Carson. So this is a recent thing too. There's a guy named Jason Henry, by the way, who works for the Southern California News Group. If you ever see his name, read the article. He's just an awesome guy. In this case, the former Carson mayor landed a $275,000 temporary position with the water replenishment district, and that spiked his pension over a lifetime by $2.7 million for 6 months of work. 6 months of work. And so, that certainly sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I'll tell you, I'd go back to work for 6 months if I could get $2.7 million. So as an aside, because we're talking about that value of long-term, I can tell you I often talk to government employees, largely teachers, because that's kind of my thing, is the K-12 school business. And I can tell you that they're always telling me that that doesn't count. The value of their compensation in the form of retirement benefits doesn't count. It's all about what they get in their paycheck. If you look at what that value is for most education employees, it adds up to about $1.5 to $2 million when they're retired. So if they retire after a 30-year career. So I always tell them, if you don't think it counts, you can put it in my 401k if you'd like. I would take $2 million. Go tell that to somebody who's about to retire. $2 million in their retirement account doesn't mean it. San Diego school superintendents. This is a story I worked on with the Union Tribune a while ago. So we do analysis annually on these things, and then we work with media to try and get it out there. Union Tribune is actually relatively balanced, not really, but they're balanced in terms of some other outlets, the LA Times, for example. You know, so the average California K-12 superintendent made $297,815 last year, almost $300,000 average, and that includes Victorville, you know, Wairika, you know, all these places that are where if you make $297,000, you're the king of the town, really. We had an issue a couple of years ago. I remember, I forget the name of the city, but it's out by the Salton Sea, and they were giving us a hard time. They would not produce data. You know, this is a fight I have every day. Every day I ask for data, and every day somebody comes back and says, no, we're not going to give it to you, and then we end up having a legal threat and all that stuff. But this guy just dug his heels in, dug his heels. Whenever I see that, I think, what are we going to find when we see this data? So I finally got that data, and I found out he was paying himself $250,000. This is a school district with about 150 kids. And so he himself was 25% of their revenue. So, you know, no wonder he didn't want us to show us, right? Because we're going to publish it, and hopefully somebody in that city is looking and, you know, paying attention and standing up at podium in a school board meeting and saying, why do we pay you 25% of everything we get from the state for education? The highest paid superintendent? Does anybody, I ruined it, I put it up there. I was gonna say, does anybody want to guess what the highest paid superintendent makes? You can't see it, can you guess?
400,000.
$743,000 a year. James Hammond of Ontario Montclair. Mr. Hammond has been making that for years. I mean, he hasn't had a year under 600,000 for many years. Yeah. And I can tell you that 83% of the Ontario Montclair School District qualifies for free lunch. 83% of those families. And the qualification threshold for a family of four is $34,000. So 83% of Ontario Montclair families make less than $34,000 a year. But this guy pays himself $743,000 a year. When I say pays himself that, of course, that's a little loose because it has to be approved by the board. But because we don't have people like Frank on our boards willing to say no, the boards in most of they're owned by the unions, they're rubber stamped. You know, they just say yes, yes, yes to whatever. So that's how that happens. Here, if he leaves for a new job, he gets 1.2 million because he's got a contract, a sweetheart deal. You know, I reviewed a couple of contracts for some superintendents here in San Diego County for a couple of board members that are on our side. And first thing I did is look at it and say, do you really have to pay him a year's salary if he quits? I mean, is that really necessary to put that in the contract so that you can attract somebody? Let's try taking that out and see what they say. You know, let's see how many applicants you get for somebody for a $300,000 job. If they don't get a golden parachute, maybe 6 months would be fine. So no one takes us up on that though. No one. So in 2021, so the reason that we're behind, everybody says, well, 2021, that's 2 years ago. Why are we not talking about 2022 data? The state does not require the data to be published for 2022 until the middle of the year following. So we are just now starting to collect 2022 data. We just ended 2021 because we just cycled through on that. So in 2021, we've gotten 99.76% of all city employees, 100% of county employees, 100% of state employees, 96.78 K-12. We're actually still working on that because their deadline is June 30th, unlike the rest of the entities. 91.78 special districts. Special districts are like water, garbage, you know, things like that. They're tough to collect. I have a guy who just beats his head against the wall because the special districts are just, you know, most likely to say no.
But those are the ones that really are killing us because for example, our utility bills, they're not subject to the electorate at all.
Yeah.
And we have no control. And so they just have pensions and salaries. And we need to know that data because I think that your water bill is not very, very little has anything to do with water. Oh, yeah. 90% of it, I think, is salaries for people that are in the water district.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll get to this in a minute, but I don't know if anybody here knows the name Hassan Ikrada. He's one of the more famous people in special districts. He's the leader of Sandbag. He wants the taxes all by mile for what we drive. He makes close to $500,000 a year. So he's a special district in this. So what have we found? Total $221 billion. We went through that number. Average total pay and benefits of all full-time public employees in the state, $126,516. So you remember at the beginning, I said government employees living off cat food, living in a van down by the river, so on and so forth. When you got $126,516, I don't know that you're in danger of having to eat cat food. And that is the average. So that means roughly half of everyone is more than that. Pay only. If we take out all the cost of benefits, that $2.7 million retirement payout that they're going to get at the end, take all that out because it doesn't count, right? $93,220. So I don't know how many people here made more than $93,000, maybe a significant number because you guys are all successful people, work hard. But out there, in the county, that's about twice what the average wage is in our county. And teachers. Median total compensation of a teacher in California in 2021, $124,915. And I can tell you, I don't begrudge them. I am very glad that we pay our teachers well. I'm very happy with that. What bothers me is when they come to the public and they say, we're on the verge of having to eat cat food, unless you take more money away from the education of our kids to give it to us, everyone's going to die, so on and so forth. If they want to come out and say, we make $124,000 a year, but we think we're worth more, I'm fine with that. I have no problem. Let's make that case. Where I have a problem is when recently, I don't know if everybody watched the negotiations in Los Angeles about the support staff, the SEIU. I don't know if that made the news with you guys, but there was a big strike, three-day strike. The teachers went out in sympathy. During that strike, the media, I saw this in 15, 20 media reports. The average pay of an SEIU member is $25,000 a year. They kept saying that over and over and over again. So I downloaded all the data. I crunched all the numbers. The average pay of a full-time SEIU member, anybody want to guess? Close, 73,000. So they were just lying through their teeth. The union produced this number. They couldn't provide backup. I asked several times, where's your supporting data? I'd like to look at your numbers. Where'd you get 25,000? Because I get 73. And so, but no one would produce it, and none of the media would pick up on it. I got responses back from a number of reporters from a number of different media outlets, but none of them said, oh, and by the way, this number is lying to you. It's actually 73,000. So they go to the market that way, and they make these pitches to get sympathy, but they're lies. They're based on lies. 988,000, almost 1 million public employees have total compensation over $100,000 in our state. 80,000 greater than $250,000. 3,000 of them over $500,000, over $500,000 a year, and 171 public employees are greater than $1 million. I have some printed lists here. I just printed out the top pension and pay people. This is pay right here. And you have to when you get to the bottom of the second page, you're at $1.1 million. So everybody on both sides here made more than $1 million last year. This is pension. It starts at 734. Hold it on the side. It starts at 1.1 million, and then ends at 650,000. So both sides of this page, 650,000. So let's talk about how underpaid. Pensions, $58 billion in pensions. Average pension for a full career 30-year retiree, $551,749. That's not what I would call excessively rich. But that's a number that I think is higher than most people would think is actually true. 107,000 is greater than $100,000 a So there's a lot of people making more than $100,000 a year, 1,200 of them over $250,000 a year. In your area, so the Poway city manager, his base pay is $247,000, total compensation almost $400,000 a year. So that includes something called pension debt. You'll see on our site. If you look at the payments your city makes, if you actually look at the city budget, one of the largest line items you will see is a lump sum payment made to the pension system that is completely outside all of their compensation stuff. It's just a lump sum. I don't know what Poway pays. In Oceanside, they pay about $22 million a year. That's where I'm from. And that's called unaccrued actuarial liability. What that means is that they need to make this extra payment so that everyone in the pension system can actually get the benefits they were promised. If they didn't make that extra payment, then people would only get 70% of what they've been promised. So I'm all in favor of paying people what they've been promised. There's no question we should do that. But honesty demands that you actually say that. You know, when the city of Escondido put a sales tax on I don't know if you remember this, but the city of Escondido put a sales tax on last election, and I communicated with a couple of council people, and I pointed out that their sales tax was actually going to raise less money than they pay in this unaccrued actuarial liability payment every year. But yet they say the sales tax is needed to patch roads and open up libraries and maintain parks and all this stuff. It's not. It's to pay their pension benefits. That's what that sales tax is for. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't need a sales tax increase to pay for all the other things. So fortunately, they turned it down. Encinitas was not so unfortunate. The former county chief administrative officer, total compensation almost $600,000 a year. County Hassan Ekrada, we talked about him. Actually, total compensation $601,000. I think I said $500,000. So I was understating. He's not that poor. Poway Unified Superintendent, total compensation $362,000. So the Poway Unified Superintendent is certainly doing pretty well. And for certificated employees, median total comp is $114,000. So that's Poway teachers in general.
So what teaching too soon?
Yeah, there's been a huge, I can tell you that I've looked at data going back, and before about the mid-2000s, teachers were indeed paid less than comparably educated county residents. So there was a time when, the poor underpaid teacher was actually true. Nowadays, in San Diego County, the median teacher makes about $30,000 a year more than they would make with that exact same education working in private industry. That's from the US Census Bureau. This is not these are not facts and alternative facts. These are real facts. So, when someone tells you how underpaid our education employees are, you need to actually look at the real data and determine that. If you look at Transparent California, there's a blog. I did a whole series on there. I looked at pay for teachers, pay for support staff, pay for superintendents, and the benefit plans. There's 4 different installments on that if you really want to do the class on what people get paid. I was also there's an Epoch Times interview that goes into that too. If anybody here reads the Epoch Times or looks at their podcast thing, I did an episode with them last year. I'm talking about the state as a whole. So what do we need to do to make public records more accessible? Fundamentally, we have the right and to see this, and we need to demand that right and make sure that it happens. We think government websites should actively list their contacts. One of the issues we have often is just figuring out who to ask. They don't make it easy to figure out who to ask. So I actually just had an intern go through a list of thousands of government agencies that were not responding to emails and do all the web searches, and buried somewhere on their website, we found the name of somebody, an email address, so we could do it. But they should tell you, who do we ask? And what good is a Public Records Act without somebody to ask? They should be required to report their compensation data to the state controller's office. I said that was true, but it's actually only true for cities and counties and special districts. It's not true for K-12. There was actually legislation last year, Senator Glazer proposed it, that would have put them into the fold of having to report their compensation, but it went nowhere, of course. because it's about accountability. So that's never going to go anywhere. Enforcement. So I think that individuals who fail to respond should be held personally responsible. You know, if I go to the contact point for Poway Unified, Christine Piaz, I think, I forget her name, but she's now not responding to me. And she doesn't respond, there should be some personal, if we sue them, there should be personal responsibility, because that's her job. That's what she's there for. So you can also go check your local agencies, just go browse. You know, Transparent California is there for everybody. Just go, you know, idly look through your local agency and just make sure you understand what people are making, pass it on to your friends, you know, let them know. You can subscribe to data on it. So if you have an agency that you're particularly interested in and you want to see when new data is posted, which is right now, we're posting all kinds of stuff for 2022 because we're starting that process. So if you just click subscribe and throw an email address in there, then when new data gets posted, you'll get an email that tells you that. So you can browse and be sure, by the way, I don't want to be responsible for anybody getting hurt. So when you do that, be sure you're sitting down. And if you take any heart medicine, you can do that first. So when you open up that page, you want to make sure you're in good shape. Let your friends and neighbors know. So I don't know how many times I used to sit, before I worked for Transparent California, the reason I got into it, I used to be sitting in bleachers at kids' events, water polo or, you know, whatever my daughters were in, swimming things, tennis, and I'd be talking to other parents, and, you know, there'd be a coach on the field, and somebody would say something about, well, we should all donate something, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, well, you know, that guy made $132,000 last year. You know, so maybe he should donate to us, you know. And so, inevitably, the person I was speaking to would say, no way, teachers don't make that much, no way. It's the truth. I get pushback all the time now, too. You guys are lying. You know, you guys are lying. The data we publish comes directly from the payroll records of the agency, directly from their payroll records, and it's made via a legal public records request. So if somebody says, now, you know, teachers in Poway don't make $114,000 a year. What they're saying is that Poway Unified has responded illegally to a legal request. That's serious. So I have invited many of those people. Just if you don't think that's accurate, send me a copy of your end of year W-2 form, redact all the social security number and all the stuff that you don't want me to see. All I want to see is your total pay and your name. And no one has ever done that. 5 years I've been asking those people. Not one single person has ever actually provided me with proof that the data we publish is somehow wrong. Hold them accountable. So when your local government tells you the only way they can afford to provide you with the service that you deserve from your tax dollars is to raise taxes, look at the data and ask them why. You know, let them know you know what their priorities are. I love using this one. So I speak at school board meetings all the time. I spoke 12 times at the last Oceanside board meeting. They hate me. But you know, they gave their superintendent a $15,000 raise or something like that for doing nothing, and our kids are doing miserable. And so, you know, when I see that, I always quote Joe Biden. It's the only Joe Biden quote that I'll probably ever do. But Joe Biden says, "Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you value." Nothing truer, right? You know, if you look at your family budget, you know, you may say, I value the education of our kids. We're putting money away for our college fund. If you look at your budget, you find out you're actually paying for box seats to the Padres. Then I can tell you what you value. You know, it's the same thing in government. Just look at their budget. And we talked about that unaccrued actuarial liability payment. In San Diego, city of San Diego, I think it's $400 million a year for that. And so when they tell you they value libraries and parks and homeless and everything else that they value, look at their budget. Tell them, no, you don't. You value your own pension benefits. That's what you value. Make your own public records requests. It's easy. So the public record, people think, you know, when we make our request, it's all legal. You know, per California Code Section 7920.00, we're hereby requesting your records, blah, 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 blah. And that's mainly because we don't know who's on the other end of it, and turnover happens. And occasionally you get some flunky who thinks they're going to say no. So we do sue people. We sued the city of Compton last year and won on this because it would provide us, we always win. We have never lost a case because it's cut and dry. It's stupid for them. City of Compton spent $7,500 to give us the data they could have given us for free. So stupid. But a public records request doesn't have to be that formal. You don't have to do that. If you are standing next to the janitor of your local school at the grocery store picking out tomatoes, and you turn to him and said, "I'd like a copy of your superintendent's contract, please," that's a public records request. It's a legal public records request, and they have 10 days to get back to you on that. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way because you have no record, and the janitor probably isn't going to have a clue where to go to get that. It's just kind of dumb to ask like that. But if you just, I often, right with Oceanside, they know me, so I don't send them all the legal language. When I want a copy of something, some record or something, I just send an email to the right person and say, Elvia, can I get a copy of the backup documentation for item 6G in the last board meeting? And she just sends it back to me. I don't have to say, per the party of the first part and the party of the second part, code section, blah, blah, yakety yak. You can do the same. It doesn't take that much. If there's anything you've ever wondered about in your city, your county, your school district, whatever, just ask. Send an email. Start with whoever the contact point is on the website. They'll have like info at, or something like that. You can just ask them. It's a public records request. Recently, I finally had a win with the state of California. I made a public records request about a year ago for some data that they hadn't updated since COVID. Ignored me completely. They ignored multiple emails. They ignored multiple calls. I went down and knocked on the door in Sacramento. I went to the CDE and I knocked on the door, went in the lobby, talked to the security guard, tried to get him to call people up. They wouldn't let me up the elevator. So, I said, okay, call whoever is responsible for answering the door, for the CDE. He couldn't get a hold of anybody. There was no one actually answering their phone in the California Department of Education. It was like, I don't know, 10:30 or 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning or something. I'm like, where are they all? So I finally sent a certified letter to Tony Thurman, the superintendent of schools, and I got an answer yesterday, finally. But, so it takes some persistence to do this, but you can do it. Spread the word, sign up for our blog. You'll get emails when we post some blog stuff. We have a Facebook site. If anybody does Facebook, join the Facebook Transparent California site. We post little tidbits every now and again. Write to the editor of your local media. When you see some article in the paper that says, we need to raise the pay of somebody because of this, you should go and say, hey, I'm looking at the data and it doesn't say that. Where are you getting this? Where are you getting this? I talked to Leanne about this. One of the issues we have is police and fire. We love police and firemen. Police and firemen deserve every single thing we give to them. But one of the issues is overtime for police and fire. It's huge. I mean, the average police and firemen in the state of California, the overtime is something like $100,000 a year, $70,000 is some big number. Personally, when someone responds to an issue that's important to me at my house, robbery or fire or something, I would kind of like to have somebody who's fresh. I would kind of like to have somebody who, maybe isn't on his 16th hour of work. I would prefer to have more people. I would, if you take all that overtime and you split it up among new employees, you could probably add quarter to a third to the staff. I think it would help California tremendously with wildfires and things if we had a quarter as many firefighters. Seems like a rational thing. Police, wouldn't it be great to have a quarter as many police officers out there patrolling? So, it would be nice if we all encouraged our police chiefs to manage their overtime. If you need more people, hire them. Easy to say. I know it's not that hard to hire, not that easy to hire them, certainly. But you've got to try. That's part of your job. Sponsoring data collection. So here we get to the part where we have a personal interest. So we are, as I said, we're a staff of 3. It's a part-time gig. I can tell you, because I post everybody else's pay, I can tell you I made $19,800 last year from Transparent California. So it's not exactly like a thing that I'm doing because I'm going to get rich. For all the people that say you're a Koch brothers funded, right wing blah 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 yakety yak organization. Well, I'm waiting for those checks. The Koch brothers can write a check anytime they want, but we don't see that. The average contribution to us is $48. So that's where we get our money. But really, we don't really, in terms of contributions, we don't necessarily want contributions. We want people to sponsor data collection for an agency. So if you have a particular agency you want to see data for, like you really like to know what the city of Poway is doing, you can actually click the sponsor button, and what will happen is that will initiate a process where they go on the priority list. I'm in charge of the priority list. So what will happen is we will look at that and we'll say, okay, we have 42 sponsors for the city of Poway, so we're gonna do them first. They're gonna be the first on our list. And so if you really want to help collect the data and incentivize or get the data quicker for any particular agency, if you just go to the site, click on sponsor, and then it puts it on the radar and we look for it first. So that's it for what I'm going to talk about today. Thank you very much. I'm going to take some questions, and I'm going to leave this number on there for now, just because I think everybody needs to know that.
Comment. Going back to utility situation, utility bills. I had my water turned off all winter, as probably many people did, and just did some water with the hose. I got my recent water bill, and it was $106, which is not a lot compared to other bills. My water usage, when it was broken down, was $6.50. The bill was $106, and I used $6.50 worth of water.
Yeah. What water agency are you with?
San Diego.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you can look it up if you want. Yeah. See what the guy in charge or woman in charge makes.
My question is, what is the difference between Transparent California and the Transparency Foundation?
Right.
Well, our name ends in ENT and there's ENCY. So, no, Transparency Foundation is a great organization. They're working, it's similar goals, transparency in government. I'm not I haven't really talked to them about their gig, but we are focused on collecting data like this, hard financial data. They collect more like bond data, I believe, and some of the the budgeting side data, things like that. So we're all about compensation. Because personally, I mean, I will rail for hours about how bonds are spent and the corruption involved in that and all that stuff. But I can tell you there is no drive that's stronger than human interest. When you have the ability to write yourself a raise, guess what happens? That's how it works. And that's how, like in our school districts, they have this thing called the Me Too raise, the most corrupt thing you can imagine. They negotiate a raise with the teachers or the support staff, and then the people who negotiated that raise apply the same raise to themselves. So you're sitting in a room talking to somebody and they want 10%. Are you going to say, no, I want to give you 5 because you know it's going to cut your raise by 5%? That's the most corrupt thing on earth, and we allow it. It's just normal in our school systems and in other public negotiations. So.
Every so often in the mail, I get these bills from a sheriff's association or the policeman or the firemen, and it's almost like send $10. It's almost like we need that locally to support them. Is that just what is that?
I'm not sure what they use that money for.
Repeat the question, please.
She's asking about the letters you get in the mail asking you to support the police or the fire or things like that. I know they do a lot of good works. I know that our police, I've run into the husband of the president of the RWC in Oceanside outside of doing Toys for Tots, often. He's part of the, I think it's the military, isn't it, what he does with. But there's a lot of really good works, and I assume that a lot of that money goes to that. I can't imagine that they're putting it in their own pockets. Yeah. Well, they want you to think that you actually need to write a check, whether you want to or not. And I would not want to discourage anybody from good donations, good causes and things. If you look at it and you think that they're using the money for something that's a worthwhile cause, certainly.
You don't know where the money's actually going.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, and we don't investigate that.
Yeah, please repeat the comments because they can't be heard on the
Oh,
Zoom.
sorry. Yeah, she's saying we don't know where the money is going, which is absolutely true. It's like any charity. It's caveat emptor. You've got to make sure that you're buying something that fits with your values and so on and so forth.
Will, does the media show any interest in this data at all or not?
There are media outlets. If you look at the California Globe, if you look at the Epoch Times, if you look at the California Policy Center does an awesome job with school issues. There are a number of media outlets that cover the Orange County Register. I've gotten published in the Orange County Register before. So there are places, not so much in San Diego County. Voice of San Diego occasionally will publish something that's a little critical. But in the Union Tribune you saw every once in a while, but generally no.
I guess another question, superintendents belong to the unions or not?
No, superintendent. There are some superintendent unions. There are some administrative unions. I'm not really quite sure where they exist or how prevalent they are, but usually superintendents are called contracted employees because they have their own contract. So do like associate superintendents and most of the executive management of the school. Charlie?
Everybody knows what Sandag is. I don't know if anybody knows what they do. I know their payroll must be pretty good.
Yes, their payroll is good. What does Sandag do is what he's asking. I can't give you a complete thing. As far as I understand it, their job is to kind of manage the coordination of all the different methods of public transportation in San Diego County. They're supposed to look at buses and trains and roads and all this stuff and figure out how all it mixes together. Like Leanne was talking about with ESG, their fundamental focus, in the case Leanne was talking about, the fundamental focus should be on returns. If we want to fund the pension plan, we should be looking at returns, period. That's what we need to look at. If your financial advisor did anything but look at returns, it would be financial malpractice. But in the case of Sandag, they should be looking at getting people around the county in the most effective way. Bye, Frank. That's what they should be looking at. But instead, of course, they're looking at all kinds of social issues and, population density and homeless housing and stuff like that.
One last thing, San Luis, you have any data on that?
San Luis? What is that?
It's similar to Sandag, only it's for the transportation corridor between San Diego and
Oh,
Los Angeles.
Lausanne.
Los Angeles?
Yeah, Lossan. Yeah, and I don't know if we have their data. I can't tell you offhand. If they're a public entity, we either should have it or maybe we haven't collected it. I don't know. But that's a great question.
I heard San Luis,
Oh.
and maybe I couldn't find anything out about San Luis because I should have been looking at Lausanne.
Yeah, give it a try. I think that's what it is. Yeah. Anything else? Oh.
Well, you were mentioning about the overtime for the firefighters and the police. Isn't that pretty much union driven? I mean, they're the ones that lobby that.
It's driven by union work rules. There are work rules that allow them to, there was an article that was done a year or so ago about all the LA firefighters that live like way different places. I mean, there are LA firefighters that commute in from Texas. And the way that they can do that is because they've developed this union work rule schedule thing that only makes them work like 2 days a week or whatever it is. Maybe they work 24 hours a day for 2 days or something like that. And then that way they can fly back to Texas and live there. So there are a ton of rules like that certainly affect it. But I have never heard of a single fire chief, or city going up against that and saying, no, we want more firefighters for our people. We don't want firefighters who make more money. That's not beneficial to our people.
Before I moved down here about 12 years ago, there was an interview of a captain of the fire department up in the Silicon Valley area, and he was making twice what his annual salary was when he was retired.
Yeah.
So he was retired, earning twice what he earned when he was working. And that was because of the unions.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. That list of pensions that I read off to you, where it's like $1 million all the way down, a huge part of that is what they call drop payments, which is called, drop is deferred retirement, something optional pension or something like that, where basically they work past their defined retirement period, and for every day they work past it, they accumulate this extra money. And often these drop payments are like $750,000. They get a lump sum when they retire because of it. So it's kind of out of control. I think it's totally out of control. Yeah. All right, thank you, Charlie.